Be me, Elena, 34, head of customer experience and implementation at a logistics SaaS company. Company sells optimization to warehouses, but what we really sell is hope with a monthly invoice. My calendar is full of customer calls and my Slack is full of internal panic dressed as questions. A spreadsheet sits open on my screen, and it feels like a knife with a friendly handle. 5 rows are highlighted, and every row is a woman from the team I built to be different. Finance calls it restructuring, but everyone knows it means cutting people before the money cuts us. The board wants churn down, burn down, and time to value down, like gravity is optional. My CEO, Max, keeps saying, "We need predictability," and his smile looks glued on. The CFO keeps asking for a final recommendation, as if pain becomes precise when you format it. My cursor hovers over Lena's name, and my stomach tightens like it's trying to resign too. Anger shows up first because anger lets you stay righteous without doing math. I tell myself the same line I have told myself for years. Implementation has always been a boys' room in a blazer, and I refuse to keep paying the cover charge. The industry rewards volume and confidence, not accuracy and care, especially when deadlines are loud. Women get called supportive when they do the same work. Men get called leaders for doing. I watched that pattern on calls, in hallways, and in promotion meetings with polite smiles. So when I got power, I decided I would rebuild the whole function, not just decorate it. My title sits in customer org, but my mindset sits in people org, and I pretend that is normal. I treat onboarding like culture because culture is the only lever I trust without checking revenue first. The company itself is bland. Beige walls, cheap coffee, and dashboards everywhere like little gods. Engineers build features, sales sells dreams, and implementation eats the consequences with a smile. I used to be the person cleaning consequences, so I learned to hate the men who created them loudly. When I got promoted, I rewrote our hiring rubric like I was rewriting history with a spreadsheet. Scoring sheets got new categories: collaboration, humility, inclusive communication, customer empathy, coachability. Those categories sounded neutral, but they punished the exact swagger I disliked. Resumes with male names got skimmed faster because my eyes learned the pattern before my brain admitted it. Resumes with women got extra attention because I called it seeing potential others ignore. If a woman hit 60% of requirements, I wrote high growth ceiling in my notes. If a man hit 90%, I wrote might be too rigid and felt clever for it. I told myself I was correcting the pipeline, not tilting it, and I believed that story easily. Inside leadership meetings, I started speaking in frameworks because frameworks sound like facts. Systemic bias, historical exclusion, representation, psychological safety, equity over equality, long-term cultural health. Max would nod, not because he loved it, but because disagreement looked risky in front of my scope. Sales hated it quietly, because sales hates anything that slows the simple story of winning. I hated sales back, because sales always wants a hero, and the hero is usually a man in a suit. I did not want to be the manager who believes in inclusion while hiring the same archetype anyway. I wanted a women-led implementation org, and I wanted it to prove itself on outcomes. That desire felt like justice, and justice is a drug when you've swallowed too much unfairness. The first time I used it in a hiring decision, it sounded like values. Now it sits behind these highlighted names like a shadow I can't scrub off. The ugly truth is that this story started with one interview and one choice. The role was Director of Implementation, the person who turned sales promises into customer reality. Max said we needed someone senior because enterprise customers do not learn gently on our timeline. Investors had started asking why customers signed and then stalled, like stalling was our hobby. Sales complained that nice onboarding does not stop cancellations when budgets tighten. Product asked for feedback, and the feedback was always the same. Your tool is strong, but your rollout is slow, and slow feels risky to executives. I heard those words and felt my chest tighten because slow had become my philosophy. I told myself slow is humane, slow is sustainable, slow is safer for teams and customers. The board heard slow and translated it into cash burning while customers wait and competitors move. Max asked me to run a search for a senior leader who could fix the bottleneck fast. I told him we should prioritize women because women get denied these roles all the time. He did that tired sigh, the one that means, I can't fight this and also fight the board. He said, fine, but we still need results fast, and the sentence landed like a warning label. Recruiting brought a short list, and 2 finalists were women from adjacent functions. One had perfect culture alignment and limited enterprise experience. Another had deep empathy skills and weaker technical confidence with technical stakeholders. Both felt like potential, and potential feels clean in a way experience never does. Then there was the third finalist, and his resume looked like it was mocking my whole plan. Name: Dylan Kovach, 38, 12 years of logistics implementations, national retail rollouts, governance frameworks. Numbers on his resume were crisp, like he had lived inside a spreadsheet and made it behave. My first reaction was irritation, because irritation keeps you from admitting respect. My second reaction was fear, because fear knows what your mouth will not say. The fear was simple. If we hire him, implementation becomes male again, and my vision becomes a slide. Still, I scheduled the interview because even I needed the performance of fairness. He walked into the glass room looking normal, which ruined the fantasy of an easy villain. Navy suit, laptop bag, notebook, calm eyes, no showy swagger. His handshake was firm but not crushing, like he did not need to prove anything. I started with a standard question, and he answered without fluff. He talked about warehouses, master data, scanner workflows, training, and the politics of IT queues. He said implementations fail when customers don't assign an owner, and everyone pretends that's fine. He said vendors fear deadlines because deadlines force the customer to choose. He said our kickoff decks probably felt friendly, but friendly is not a plan. My rational brain nodded because he was describing the problems I saw daily. My ideological brain flared because he was describing the tools I had decided were harmful. I asked how he handles conflict, hoping he would reveal the aggression I expected. He stayed calm and said, conflict is unmanaged expectations, not personalities. He said structure prevents drama because structure makes decisions visible and excuses harder to hide. He said you can be kind and still be firm, and firmness is not the same as cruelty. Then he said the sentence that stuck under my skin like a splinter. Empathy without structure becomes permission to delay forever, and permission is not the same as support. I felt offended because it made my approach sound like avoidance wearing a warm smile. He described coaching, documentation, and clear roles, like clarity was respect. He mentioned promoting women into senior roles, and I could hear the "I'm safe" signal in it. Maybe it was true, maybe it was calculated, and I hated that both possibilities looked identical. He finished by saying our product could win, but only if implementation becomes predictable to buyers. Predictable to him meant gates, owners, and consequences that are uncomfortable but honest. The interview ended and he did not push, which made him harder to reject. He thanked me, wished us luck, and left without trying to sell himself like a savior. After he left, I sat alone with my notes and the most annoying fact in business. Objectively, Dylan was the best candidate. Subjectively, Dylan was the wrong symbol for my mission. I opened the internal tracker like it was a moral court. 3 women stared back at me as names, titles, and the future I wanted to build. Lena, 29, started in support, knew every customer pain point by memory, and cared too much. Nadia, 31, customer success, could calm an ops director mid-meltdown and still keep trust alive. Mira, 30, account ops, contract sharp, detail obsessed, quietly ambitious, always doing invisible glue work. None of them had owned a full enterprise rollout end-to-end with executive pressure in their inbox. Max messaged to ask if Dylan was the real deal. Irritation spiked at the idea that a man could be the deal when women were standing right there. I typed back that he was strong, but culture fit felt questionable. Culture fit is the safest weapon because it sounds like taste, not discrimination. Max called, and I could hear board pressure in the pauses between his words. He asked if Lena could deliver outcomes quickly because cash does not respect learning curves. I told him if we keep hiring ready-made male fixers, women will never get the runway to grow. He sighed and said, "Runway is a bank balance, not a moral concept, and ours is shrinking." I said principle matters, and he said payroll matters, and we both knew who wins that argument. He said he trusted me because implementation was under my scope and I had to own it fully. Trust felt like permission, and permission felt like victory. I emailed recruiting to reject Dylan, using the cleanest language I could find. Not aligned with values, leadership style too traditional, culture risk, thank you for your time. Then I called Lena into my office, and her face looked nervous, like she expected criticism. I offered her director of implementation, and her eyes widened in shock. She asked if I was sure she was ready. I said nobody is fully ready, especially women who never get to be ready on paper. She cried, promised she would work nonstop, and I told her we would do it sustainably. It felt like justice, and justice feels warm when you are convinced you are correcting history. I announced the new structure to the org, and I leaned into the symbolism. Implementation would be women-led, empathy first, psychologically safe, and free of intimidation. Customers would be partners, not targets, and success would be sustainable, not forced. Rules followed because rules make values real. No interrupting, no pressure language, no hold their feet to the fire. Escalation got renamed to alignment because words felt like sharp tools and I wanted fewer cuts. I created a Slack channel called #safe-rollouts and pinned rules like commandments. No sarcasm, no pressure language, no public call-outs, no urgent unless someone is bleeding. We replaced escalations with alignment check-ins, and I congratulated myself for making the language kinder. I pushed the hiring pipeline harder because I thought the cure was more of the medicine. Every open role in implementation got a women first note on the rec, written in softer words. I told myself it was outreach strategy, not exclusion, and I believed my own phrasing. A junior recruiter asked if we should still interview a strong male applicant who applied early. I said we can keep him warm, but our priority is diversifying leadership. And she nodded fast. In a weekly sync, the head of sales joked that we were building an onboarding sorority. I laughed like it was harmless. Then I wrote it down as evidence of disrespect. I asked him to watch his language, and he apologized with that annoyed smile men use. Later, he started escalating customers around Lena and straight to Max, calling it protecting revenue. I called it undermining women leadership, and I confronted him in a one-on-one. He said customers want commitments, not affirmations, and I told him he was romanticizing aggression. We left the meeting polite and angry, like adults in a small apartment. One customer asked directly, who could make hard calls when their IT team delayed again? Lena said we would align stakeholders, and the customer asked what happens if they refuse. Silence stretched on the call, and I jumped in with a warm answer about partnership. Afterward, Lena messaged me asking if she was allowed to be firm. I told her to be firm without sounding harsh, which is like telling someone to punch softly. She sent a thumbs up, and I pretended the thumbs up meant confidence. Customers loved the first weeks because customers always love vendors who sound patient and available. Survey comments said we were thoughtful, supportive, and unusually respectful for a software vendor. I screenshotted those comments and dropped them in leadership chat like trophies. Our response stayed gentle because gentle had become part of our brand and my self-image. Fear left the room, and I treated that as progress. Results, however, demand more than vibe and careful language. Results require customers to do work they don't want to do. Customers don't want to clean data, assign owners, or prioritize training over daily fires. Customers want the vendor to handle it without making them fight internally. Our approach avoided making anyone uncomfortable, including the customer's own leadership. Polite flexibility became our default response. Data delays got met with understanding, because understanding felt like respect. Missing owners got met with patience, because patience felt like safety. Missed meetings got met with rescheduling, because rescheduling felt humane. Each choice felt good in isolation, like a small victory against old toxic habits. Together, those choices built a system where nothing moved unless the customer felt like moving. Lena tried to add structure, but she could feel my values sitting behind her like a supervisor. Pushing hard sounded like betrayal of the thing I promoted her to embody. Nadia started tracking tasks, and every task had the same note. Waiting on customer. Mira warned that contract milestones were slipping into dangerous territory. I told her relationships matter more than paper, and I hated how righteous it sounded. Sales began asking for go-live dates because sales lives on certainty. Our answers stayed careful because careful sounded ethical, and I was addicted to sound unethical. Customers ask for commitments because budgets love dates, and executives hate uncertainty. We offered flexible plans because flexibility sounded respectful and non-coercive. Customers started saying flexible meant unreliable. One big rollout paused, then cooled, then quietly died without a dramatic explosion. The customer said they liked us, but their CFO needed a firm plan with dates and owners. Our firm plan never arrived, because firmness was treated like pressure in our internal culture. Churn arrived quietly, then suddenly, then loudly, like a fire that starts behind a wall. Max started showing me retention trends, and his face looked like he was trying not to blame me. I said the customers were not ready for change, and the sentence tasted like an excuse. He asked why they signed if they weren't ready. I did not have a clean answer because we never made readiness non-negotiable in practice. Non-negotiable sounded too much like coercion. Pressure was the sin I had organized my identity around avoiding. New RFPs came back with comments about implementation confidence. Customers loved the product but feared the rollout and the timeline vagueness. Fear is expensive because fear makes buyers choose the vendor that feels safer. Safety in procurement language means predictable outcomes. Predictable outcomes come from structure, not tone, even if tone is beautiful. Our tone was immaculate. Our structure was optional. A competitor name started showing up in deal threads and procurement emails. Flow route solutions, small, sharp, and suddenly everywhere in our niche. Their pitch was boring and powerful. Go live in a fixed window, clear gates, clear owners, clear consequences. I dismissed them as an aggressive shop that burns people to look fast. Then a major prospect we had nurtured went quiet. Account management finally got a call back, and the reason was simple. Flowroot's rollout plan convinced their execs more than our demos and our relationship building. Someone forwarded a leaked Flowroute PDF from an RFP response. Opening it felt like stepping into a reality that didn't care about my values deck. Data readiness gates, training requirements, executive-sponsored check-ins, and escalation that ends with decisions. The plan was firm without sounding cruel or macho. The summary slide listed their implementation leader, Dylan Kovac. The man I rejected for culture fit was now selling confidence as a product. My stomach dropped, then anger rushed in to cover the drop. I told myself he was selling fear and calling it leadership. I told myself customers were addicted to being bullied because that was easier than self-audit. We lost another deal. Another customer said the same thing in a polite procurement voice. Your product looks great, but their rollout looks real. Nice became our brand in the worst possible way. Board meeting turned cold and quiet, like everyone was saving words for the blame section. An investor asked why churn was rising if our fit was obvious. Max tried to talk about the market, supply chain cycles, and budget freezes. The investor cut him off and said, "Execution is the market." Eyes shifted toward me without anyone speaking my name. The investor said we'd lost multiple deals to a competitor led by a candidate we interviewed and rejected. Culture fit, he repeated, like it tasted strange on his tongue. I said we made a values-based decision because that sentence kept my identity intact. He asked if our values included staying in business. The room went silent in the way rooms do when a blade lands cleanly. Afterward, Max asked if we should hire someone above Lena. The subtext was obvious. Bring in a more experienced leader. Bring in someone like Dylan. I snapped that the moment a woman struggles, leadership reaches for a man. Max rubbed his temples and said, "We are running out of cash, not running out of debate time." I said runway is always political because women never get enough of it. He said, "Prove your model works then," and his voice sounded exhausted. Finance started sending headcount scenarios with neat names like lean and survival. Implementation and CS were labeled high cost relative to retention in bold cells. My team became a slide, My women-led experiment became a cost center. I fought to keep them, but every argument sounded soft against hard churn numbers. Max told me we had to cut and asked me to own the process. The request tasted like humiliation because I was being asked to execute the opposite of my promise. The spreadsheet expanded, and names turned into decisions. Lena's name sat at the top like a verdict, and my throat felt tight. Layoff day arrived with fake smiles and quiet footsteps. I read scripts to women who trusted me, and each sentence felt like a betrayal. Lena asked what happens to customers now, and she sounded more worried for them than for herself. I said we will transition, which meant nothing, because the plan was only burn reduction. Nadia cried and apologized, as if being cut was her fault and not a board decision. Mira asked why we built a department just to erase it when things got hard. No answer sounded honest, so I gave a vague one and hated myself for it. The office emptied in chunks and the air felt thinner after each goodbye. Max called me in after the last box left. His face looked older, like stress stopped waiting politely and started collecting interest. The board wants a leaner structure, he said, and they think people functions can be outsourced for now. I asked if it was his decision or theirs. He looked at the table and said, "It doesn't matter because the bank balance decides either way." Severance packet slid across the desk. Clean paper, dirty feeling. The same script I used on others was now being used on me. I signed because rent exists and pride does not pay bills. Home became a couch, a laptop, and a LinkedIn feed I could not stop refreshing. FlowRoute kept posting wins. Customers kept praising fast rollouts and clear ownership, like ownership was a magical ingredient. Dylan kept appearing in photos, calm, professional, and infuriatingly normal. Hate felt easier than regret, so hate became my breakfast. I wrote posts about the industry rewarding coercion and calling it strength. I wrote about investors destroying humanity for graphs and then calling it discipline. Likes appeared from HR people I barely knew, and I treated them like support. Interviews dried up faster than my confidence would admit. Recruiters praised my values leadership, then asked what metrics I improved, and I hated the question. I answered with culture language, and they answered with polite silence, which felt like punishment. At home, I started doom scrolling and writing longer posts that sounded like essays and felt like armor. I blamed investors. I blamed capitalism. I blamed the industry's addiction to masculine certainty. I did not blame my own shortcut, because that would crack the identity holding me together. One of my former teammates messaged me and said she never knew what to do when customers stalled. She said we needed a hard plan and clear escalation, and we never had it. My first thought was that she lacked confidence. The thought that I designed escalation out of the system never fully formed. Another FlowRoute announcement popped up, another partnership we once chased. The client quote said their team held us accountable in the best way. Accountable in the best way. The phrase made me furious because it sounded like Dylan's interview answer. I stared at the screen and told myself I would still reject him. Not because it was good for business, but because it protected the only story I still had. Closing the laptop did not stop the anger. Silence in the apartment only made the narrative louder. And the narrative kept repeating the line that still felt warm. The market punishes empathy, and I refuse to call that my fault. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. What do you think about this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next story.